एक इंच जमीन भी किसी और को नहीं लेने देंगे।
Hello and welcome. I'm Nitin Gokhale and you are on StratNews Global. With that statement, हम एक इंच जमीन भी किसी और को लेने नहीं देंगे. Defense Minister और रक्षा मंत्री राजनाथ सिंह read out a longish statement on the process of disengagement in Ladakh after a 10-month-long standoff between Indian and Chinese troops. In the morning today, he spoke in the Rajya Sabha first and then Lok Sabha and gave out a detailed statement about how the disengagement will proceed, the step-by-step process, which is first disengage, verify, and then again go on to the next step. He elaborated and he gave out the roadmap for that disengagement. So the question that we are asking today in this program is what turned the situation in India's way, Ladakh breakthrough, which is what the disengagement is all about. What turned it India's way? And to answer those questions, many of those questions which many of our viewers will have, we have a very eminent panelist with us, former diplomat and now a strategic thinker, Gautam Bambawale, our former ambassador to Bhutan, to Pakistan, High Commissioner to Pakistan, and more importantly, India's ambassador to China when the Wuhan summit, the first informal summit between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping had taken place. He was our ambassador in China and obviously a China watcher, a very avid China watcher, a China specialist. Welcome, Gautam, to this program. We're glad to have you.
Thank you very much, Nitin. I'm so happy to be with you tonight.
Thank you. So before we start the discussion, I just want to take you through the viewers through the 3 or 4 points that stand out in Defense Minister Rajnath Singh's statement, which actually sets out what India has achieved in the Ladakh breakthrough. If we look at some of the highlights, if we go back to May 2020, I think India's first response to Chinese incursions was swift and in equal measure. It was a mirror deployment, as many of us know by now. And the clash at Galwan, which I think took the Chinese by surprise, because remember, they haven't had bloodshed in their army since 1979. And the Indian troops' valiant fight back at Galwan after being taken by surprise and after being deceived by the Chinese soldiers, the kind of fight back that was displayed by the Indian soldiers really sent ripples in the Chinese army. And I think that was a turning point in the early phase of the standoff, which began in May. Then, of course, the government of India got into the act. The response was not limited only to mirror deployment on the line of actual control, but also economic measures like banning Chinese apps, which were a big hit in Indian market. They were very popular. But by swiftly banning Chinese apps, also tightening scrutiny of Chinese investments in Indian businesses, I think India showed a clear intent in not stopping only at military action. I think these 2 or 3 points stand out. And of course, we will talk about the other steps that need to be taken. But Gautam, your first reaction to the disengagement process and why it is an important landmark in the history of India-China boundary dispute.
Thank you very much, Nitin. My first reaction, of course, to the statement by Raksha Mantri, Defense Minister, Mr. Rajnath Singh in Parliament, is that this news of de-escalation and disengagement, at least in a subsector in Ladakh, which is at the Pangong Lake, Pangong So, is a positive development. So I welcome it. My understanding is that it will start with this particular part of Ladakh. And once it is successfully undertaken with verification, as you have rightly highlighted, once the Pangong Lake area has been undergone through disengagement, then it will be extended to other parts of Ladakh slowly but surely. So this is a welcome development. It's a positive development. And I hope that both sides will continue to work at this disengagement process.
Indeed. In fact, the video that we are showing has been released by the Indian Army. and it shows the situation on the south bank of Pangong. So just near Chushul, at the peaks, the Rizangla, Richinla, Mukpari, and the Magar Hill, Gurung Hill area, where India had taken tanks and had swiftly occupied those peaks on 29th and 30th of August. But eventually, if you look at the distance between the tanks, it was virtually non-existent. They were 100 feet apart, 150 feet apart, which was a very dangerous situation, prone to escalation. If one mistake had happened from either side, things would have really gone out of control. And I think this is the second part of the disengagement that we are talking about on the southern bank of Pangong, where Indian troops have come down from those peaks, and so have the tanks on both on Indian side and the Chinese side. So I think this would have been a very tense moment for the entire national security establishment in India. And as somebody who's handled it at the highest level, what do you think has gone into this disengagement process? I mean, the 9th round of talks, of course, we know, but there would have been a lot of backroom discussions, backroom outreach to the Chinese leadership as well as Chinese officials. Gautam?
Absolutely, Nitin. You know that a previous process of disengagement, as it had been worked out at Galwan, turned out to be deadly, turned out to into the loss of life on June 15th of last year, 2020. So obviously a lot of thought, a lot of details have gone into the current round of disengagement, which is taking place at Pangong. The details which have been revealed by the Raksha Mantri in Parliament are very, very detailed, and you can see that a lot of thought, a lot of foresight has gone into getting this together. The proof of the pudding, of course, lies in the eating. So the verification process will also be very, very important. We don't want it to end up like it did last year in June at Galwan. But I think the fact that such a detailed process of disengagement has been worked out and signed, obviously, by both sides, or at least signed on to by both sides, implies that both sides are keen to disengage, and which is absolutely essential. This close proximity situation, which you have described very well, including with heavy artillery and tanks, is not a situation which is sustainable. So I think this is it is a good disengagement process. The way I look at it, Nitin, is that there is one very important principle which is involved in what has been revealed both by the Chinese Defense Ministry and by the Defense Minister of India. And this principle is that troops and other equipment will move back to known bases. And therefore, in the north bank of Pangong, you have the Chinese moving east of Finger 8 to their Sirijap post, which is known to us, which existed in the past. And India similarly will move west of Finger 3 to its Dancing post, which is known to us and known to them too. Now, any other structures which may have come up in the last few months after May of 2020 in this area are going to be demolished. And all this spells out a very detailed sort of thinking which has gone into getting this disengagement process underway. I hope it succeeds. Both countries require it to succeed, and then we need to extend it to other parts of Ladakh.
That's true, and we have a map up on the screen for our benefit of our viewers. Finger 3, as you can see, is the last point up to which Indian vehicles can come. Finger 8, east of Finger 8 is the Sirijap post, which Ambassador Gautam Bambawale just mentioned, where the Chinese are going to be east of Finger 8. And the area between Finger 4, or let's say Finger 3 and Finger 8 will now be not patrolled by either side until some kind of a military and diplomatic agreement emerges in the future. So effectively, what has happened is that all that moves that the Chinese had made into the Finger 4, Finger 5 area has been negated, and they have had to go back to Finger 8 or east of Finger 8 really. And I want to show you a photograph of the area between Finger 3 and Finger 4, where Indian troops actually have to walk while they patrol in that area between finger 3 and finger 4. And while the Chinese have had a road, now this is a very narrow single file road for the Indian troops to go from finger 3 to finger 4. And that was the disadvantage that Indian troops had all along. While the Chinese came in their vehicles from finger 8 to finger 5 in no time. And that was one of the reasons why Indians were caught by surprise in early May 2020. But all that is now looks to be history for the moment at least, and the troops will disengage from here. I think this is an important point in India's resolute stand, because after this had happened, India had gone and occupied the heights in Chushul, which actually gave a tactical leverage to Indian military and to Indian negotiators, which has resulted in the agreement that we see now. But I want to also bring to you what Defense Minister Rajnath Singh said, exactly what Ambassador Gautam Bambawale was saying. And I just listened into what he said about the agreement on going east of finger 8 and west of finger 3 or west of finger 4. Let's listen in.
पैंगोंग लेक के नॉर्थ एवं साउथ बैंक पर डिसएंगेजमेंट का समझौता हो गया है और इस बात पर भी सभापति महोदय इस बात पर भी सहमत हो गई है कि पैंगोंग लेक से पूर्व से पैंगोंग लेक से पूर्ण डिसएंगेजमेंट के 48 आवर्स के अंदर सीनियर कमांडर स्तर की बातचीत हो तथा बाकी बचे हुए मुद्दों पर भी हल निकाला जाए। सभापति महोदय, पैंगोंग लेक एरिया में चीन के साथ डिसएंगेजमेंट का जो समझौता हुआ है उसके अनुसार दोनों पक्ष फॉरवर्ड डिप्लॉयमेंट को फेज्ड, कोऑर्डिनेटेड एंड वेरीफाइड मैनर में हटाएंगे। चीन अपनी सेना की टुकड़ियों को नॉर्थ बैंक में फिंगर 8 के पूरब की दिशा की तरफ रखेगा और इसी तरह भारत भी अपनी सेना की टुकड़ियों को फिंगर 3 के पास अपने परमानेंट बेस धन सिंह थापा पोस्ट पर रखेगा। इसी तरह की कार्रवाई साउथ बैंक एरिया में भी दोनों पक्षों द्वारा की जाएगी। ये कदम आपसी समझौते के तहत बढ़ाए जाएंगे तथा जो भी निर्माण आदि दोनों पक्षों द्वारा अप्रैल 2020 से नॉर्थ एंड साउथ बैंक पर किया गया है उन्हें हटा दिया जाएगा और पुरानी स्थिति कायम कर दी जाएगी। सभापति महोदय, यह भी तय हुआ है कि दोनों पक्ष नॉर्थ बैंक पर अपनी सेना की गतिविधियां, जिसमें परंपरागत स्थानों की पेट्रोलिंग भी सम्मिलित है, को अस्थायी रूप से स्थगित रखेंगे। पेट्रोलिंग तभी शुरू की जाएगी जब सेना एवं राजनयिक स्तर पर यानी डिप्लोमेटिक लेवल पर आगे बातचीत करके समझौता बनेगा। इस समझौते पर कार्रवाई कल से नॉर्थ एंड साउथ बैंक पर प्रारंभ हो गई है। यह उम्मीद है इसके द्वारा पिछले साल के गतिरोध से पहले जैसी स्थिति बहाल हो जाएगी।
So जैसी स्थिति बहाल हो जाएगी, status quo ante as it existed before May 2020. Very clear assertion there by Defense Minister. And he also said in that long statement that other friction points will be discussed after the first meeting of the commanders, once the first phase of withdrawal and first phase of disengagement is over. Now, that is a question that a lot of people, a lot of our viewers, a lot of our followers on Twitter have been asking. And I want to take you to that discussion, that some of the other subsectors may still be under discussion. How will that proceed in your understanding?
Look, Nitin, I think, the Pangong So area is the first. And if the disengagement process works well here, then it will be followed similarly in other parts of Ladakh, in the Depsang region and other subsectors of Ladakh. Let me also say that there are two very important points here which I would like to highlight to you and your viewers, which is that one, as we have heard the defense minister saying, that this is a restoration of the status quo ante as it existed before this particular move by the Chinese PLA took place in early May 2020. And I think that is a very important thing for India. That is the bottom line for India. Secondly, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that this disengagement has taken place without both sides having to define where the LAC lies. Therefore, they have agreed to move back and disengage forces without having to show, or without having to, at short notice and in a few months, decide where the LAC lies. And this brings me to my third and final point, that in our view, what the Chinese military action, what Chinese military coercion in Ladakh was attempting to do was to unilaterally define the LAC with India. And the fact that they have now gone back to their known bases shows that this sort of thing, this definition of an LAC or eventually even a boundary, cannot be done unilaterally. It will have to be done through negotiations and discussions between both countries. So I would say that this is a very good result for India. It shows the determination and resolve not only of the people of India, not only of the government of India, not only of the Indian armed forces, who have also shown their bravery, but we have achieved, at least in this part of Ladakh, which is the Pangong Lake area, the Pangong So area, a result which I think is very satisfactory as far as India is concerned. So I wanted to bring all these to the attention of your listeners, that China's attempt to unilaterally define the LAC by moving its troops in large numbers along with heavy artillery has not succeeded. It will have to be done in consultation with India. And I do hope that that process of LAC verification or even boundary resolution can begin and commence soon, and also move ahead quickly.
That's true. And that actually answers this question posed by one of our viewers, GS. What are India's options post initial withdrawal from Pangong So? And I think the hardball negotiations are par for course in any old dispute. It's a very long and old dispute between India and China. So I think we'll have to wait and watch how it goes. But it's a good beginning, like Ambassador Gautam Bambawale said. I also want you to listen to one more part of Defense Minister Rajnath Singh's speech, which actually talks about other issues involved in this entire standoff, call it episode. But first listen in, and then we will discuss going forward.
महोदय, मैं इस सदन को आश्वस्त करना चाहता हूं कि इस बातचीत में हमने कुछ भी खोया नहीं है सभापति महोदय। सदन को यह भी जानकारी देना चाहता हूं अभी भी LAC पर डिप्लॉयमेंट तथा पेट्रोलिंग के बारे में कुछ आउटस्टैंडिंग इश्यूज बचे हुए हैं। इन पर हमारा ध्यान आगे की बातचीत में रहेगा। दोनों पक्ष इस बात पर सहमत हैं कि बाइलेटरल एग्रीमेंट्स तथा प्रोटोकॉल के तहत पूर्ण डिसएंगेजमेंट जल्द से जल्द कर लिया जाए। अब तक की बातचीत के बाद चीन भी देश की संप्रभुता की रक्षा के हमारे संकल्प से पूरी तरह और अच्छी तरह अवगत है। हमारी यह भी अपेक्षा है कि चीन द्वारा हमारे साथ मिलकर बचे हुए मुद्दों को हल करने का पूरी गंभीरता के साथ प्रयास किया जाएगा।
See, there you are. What Ambassador Bambawale just said, that there will be further negotiations, and China would probably have realized by now that any negotiations will have to be on equal footing. It will have to be consultations with each other rather than unilateral attempts at altering the line of actual control. I think that's the point that Chinese would have taken home from here, at least to begin with.
Yes, I agree with you entirely, Nitin. And let me, in answer to that question which you had just put up from one of your listeners, the point he makes or she makes is that China can play hardball. Don't forget that India can play hardball too. And India has, in fact, played hardball over the last few months. And the result that we are seeing today, at least in a small part of the Ladakh frontier, is a result of the determination and resolve of the Indian people and the government of India, as well as of our armed forces, who have in addition shown tremendous bravery. So I believe that, people should understand that there are two sides to a coin, and not try to blow it out of proportion by looking at only one side of the coin.
Indeed, as one of our viewers has rightly commented, must have been a tough negotiation. And it was indeed, as we see, it's taken almost 10 months and 9 rounds of Corps Commander talks. But I think
Let me,
that's the
let me
way.
just, let me just quickly add, if you permit me, that all
Please.
negotiations with the Chinese are always tough. And Indian negotiators are also very tough on every subject and every negotiation that we undertake with the Chinese. But of course, I completely agree with your reader and your listener and your viewer that on the boundary, on the LAC, negotiations are much more difficult because we don't have an agreed boundary or an agreed LAC, and therefore the negotiations obviously are very difficult, very protracted, and you have to try to have foresight to see what are the possibilities, hurdles which could come in the way, and resolve them at the start itself.
Indeed, and then you're speaking from experience, because long experience in dealing with the Chinese. You have been part of some of those, excuse me, some of those tough negotiations in the past. And of course, as ambassador, you were part of that previous crisis when the previous crisis was happening and the Wuhan summit took place post the Doklam issue. So many viewers actually have been writing in as we speak, and many of them have this apprehension that the Chinese cannot be trusted, and come summer they might come back to doing what they've been doing. So just as an observation, one has to look at how the Chinese behave. If one stands up to the Chinese, then there is always this feedback that one gets from diplomats and our military officers, that the Chinese normally try bullying tactics. If they can't get their way, then they come down to negotiating, and that's why it takes such a long time. You've heard over this past 10 months that we've had the 9 rounds of negotiations with the Chinese, and each of the rounds have gone on for something like 10 to 15 hours, anything between 10 to 15 hours. One, of course, because there's a translation interpretation issue. The second is that the LAC is not demarcated. There are differing perceptions. And this time there was the additional pressure of heavy troop deployment from both sides, up to about 35 to 40,000 troops, and heavy platforms were part of the entire standoff in Ladakh. So in that sense, this is a remarkable achievement on both sides. And Ambassador Gautam Bambawale has rejoined us. Let me ask him that this kind of an unprecedented standoff or large-scale deployment hasn't happened in at least in the past 30 years. This would have been something that has taken a lot of people by surprise. But still, we have come out of that, and at least the first phase has began. What are the lessons for India from here?
Look, I think, all of us here in India must understand that while this process of disengagement will eventually lead to restoration of peace and tranquility in the India-China border areas, we must remember that the signals that the Chinese were sending by undertaking this military kind of coercion, which I call it, in Ladakh, is something which we should not forget. And they were basically pointing out, and they were basically trying to tell us two things. One is that there is a huge asymmetry in comprehensive national power between India and China, and that includes both economic and military power. And therefore, they were trying to show us that at least tactically, they were in a position where they could unilaterally change the status quo, they could unilaterally define the LAC and perhaps the boundary. But what is more important is the strategic aspects of the moves that they made in Ladakh. And those are something which are not going to go away quickly. And that strategic aspect which the Chinese were trying to signal is that they are the single most big power in Asia, and that India must understand its place in this pecking order by challenging them militarily and also taking other steps, both geopolitically as well as on the economic side. We have said that we do not accept this. And this reality is not going to change even if the disengagement process is undertaken successfully in Ladakh. So we have to work, India as a country, as a people, as a society. We need to continue to work to reduce this asymmetry in comprehensive national power, in economic power, in military power between the two countries. And this is a long-term game. It will take us quite some time to reduce this to an extent where we can live with it.
Indeed, but that was a good wake-up call, I would think, as a commentator, as an observer, that had this crisis not taken place, perhaps we would have been still a little complacent in saying that we can manage our differences, we can live, like I think former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh said, that there is enough space for both to grow. But clearly, China doesn't want India to grow, or at least not become a power to reckon with. And that wake-up call, I think, would propel the country as a whole towards achieving more in the economic field, in our comprehensive national power, as you mentioned. And I think this is a good beginning, and it's a good beginning to the year 2021, after the gloomy and I would say very pessimistic forecast about how India is now going to be steamrolled by the Chinese military machine. At least this has been shown not to be true, at least for the moment. Let's hope the things go only northwards from here. And I don't mean to Tibet, but certainly India has shown that one can stand. But on that note, let me thank you, Gautam Bambawale, for finding time in a very busy schedule and giving us excellent insights into India-China relationship. I thank all our readers and viewers here who have joined us here and also making the comments and asking questions. Do keep watching StratNews Global. We will come up with such programs and, of course, bring you more reports from the ground as and when possible. Until the next time, it's goodbye and thank you.